James 4, verses 1 through 4. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly, to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, do you not know that the friendship with the world is an enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. We all struggle with things in our life. We all have those wonderful times where we are picked on, we are used and abused, we are treated illy when it comes to places where we work, when we're around other family members, etc., etc. In the Old Testament, who is the person most taken advantage of, who was used and abused in the workplace? Anybody?
Say that again.
In the Old Testament times, who was the person most taken advantage of, who was used and abused in the workplace?
Oh, a person, one person.
One person.
Yeah. So I would agree with Jerry. She said Joseph.
Jacob.
David?
Jacob.
Jacob.
And that's who we're looking at today. Jacob, he lived a really interesting life. He started off taking advantage of his brother, got the birthright, got the blessing of the firstborn, and then he ran away because he was threatened to be murdered by his older brother. He goes to another country and gets taken advantage of there by another family that he was married into. And he never fought hard to right the wrongs and injustice that he faced. He bottled it all up and never said a word until it was almost too late. I guess he just didn't like conflict. Do you like conflict?
No.
No, I'm not a real big fan of it either. Especially when I'm having to face people who I know have ulterior motives, and they try and trip me up to the point where I have to sit there and really think. It makes my stomach churn sometimes, depending on who it is that I'm having this conflict with. And I know we all feel the same way and we have those same things. And I'm sure that Jacob was feeling some of those feelings as he thought about Laban. When Laban came to mind, or when Laban did the things to him, it was like, oh. I'm sure that if he'd have had the opportunity to invest in a toilet paper company, he could have made millions on himself. Jacob decides that the best option for him is to just shut up, not say a word, until it gets to the point where it's like, I just need to leave. I just need to walk out and get away. Sometimes that's our best option as well. So Jacob takes his family and leaves for home. What he doesn't understand is he's still going to have to face the confrontation, whether he wants to or not. Remember in Genesis 30, Jacob has finished working the allotted time that he agreed to serve for both of his wives. And he wants to go home because it's time for him to start being able to provide for his own family. But Laban really does not want to let Jacob go. He wants to keep him around because he has prospered greatly and is becoming very wealthy and very greedy. Genesis 30, verses 27 through 32. But Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages and I will give it. And Jacob said to him, you yourself know how I have served you and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly. And the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. But now when I shall provide, when shall I provide for my own household also? He said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be my wages. Of course, if we read a little bit further, as soon as Laban agreed to this, Laban sent his sons through the area and took out everything that Jacob asked for and sent them to another distant part of the land.
Yeah.
He took what Jacob wanted. Yet Jacob still prospers. Laban sees this and continues to do what he can to keep Jacob around for as long as he can. No matter how Laban tried to get the best of Jacob, everything Jacob touched prospered. This happens when God is on your side. Once Laban tips his hand to Jacob and that he fully intends to take everything by force and leave Jacob with nothing, Jacob then understands and realizes it's time to leave. But does he make this decision on his own? No. He's still sitting there, and he's probably stewing on it, brewing on it, working himself up to a tizzy, but he's not saying a word. All of this, when you look at Laban and Jacob, Laban is Jacob in an unredeemed state. God is showing what he would have been if he had not given his life to the Lord. What a great mirror and encouragement to Jacob to see how God was shaping his character. If you were an unredeemed person, would you actually like to meet you
No.
and what you would have turned into?
I didn't even like who I was.
I'm
back
kind of
then.
curious about that. What would have I been like if I had not given my life to God and to Christ? What kind of person would I be? I have an idea. And I will leave it at that. Genesis 31, verses 1 through 3. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all this wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. Laban's sons, they were obviously jealous. Here they're watching Jacob. He's going around and he's continuously taking out parts of the herd that were his wages. And they got jealous. And they started spreading these things to everybody that would listen. Oh, look at what Jacob's doing. He's stealing all of our inheritance. Dad, why are you letting him do this? Well, all of these falsehoods and that, they made Laban think the same way. Well, look at him, what he's doing. How dare him steal from me? I've been so good to that boy. I've treated him like one of my own. Remember a couple weeks ago when we talked about the security guard that talked himself into dying of freezing to death. If you spread the rumor or spread the thought long enough, it becomes the truth. All of this poison reached Laban. And no, he did not regard Jacob as anything special anymore. He started thinking the same things. Prior to this, in all the times that Laban actually cheated Jacob, God did not tell him it's time to leave. Not once. He wanted him to continue dealing with this situation. I personally don't think he dealt with it very well. He bottled it up. He never said a word about anything. Now God says it's time to go. And there is really a time to stick out bad situations. There's a time to stick them out Even if it seems that you are being treated unfairly and there are times that you need to just pack up and go. It's like enough is enough. The difference isn't the situation, but God's direction. So that really should encourage us to pray for that leading all the time. I know we keep on looking and saying, Lord, when? When is Jasara going to happen? When, O Lord? Genesis 31, 4 through 9. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, and all the flock bore the striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. So Jacob, he calls his wives to a secret get-together out in the field where the flock is. And this is probably a good thing, because I'm sure that Laban has little spies all over the place that are listening to report back to Laban everything that Jacob is doing, his wives are doing, his daughters and that. And it kind of reminds me of Quigley Down Under, when Quigley asked her, what do you think? And she goes, no, of everybody here, only you would ask me what I think. He's asking his wives, what do you think? We know that Laban has done him wrong left and right. And all he's done was learned a lot of patience. Although I don't think it's really patience that he's learned. He's bottled too much up. Genesis 31, 10 through 14. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion of inheritance left to us in our father's house? Jacob relates just how God came to him and what God had told him, what God had showed him in these dreams. God did it because he saw what Laban was doing, and God was not happy. God will only allow you to be used and abused and mistreated for so long. God sees the injustice, and he prospered Jacob no matter where he went and what he did. Why? Because Jacob at Bethel erected a pillar to him, anointed it with oil, and said, I will follow you. You are my God. God sees the hurt that the world or the enemy and other people do to us. He sees it. If we have a relationship with Jesus Christ, then God will make us prosper in those bad situations and difficult times. It will be like Jacob's son, Joseph, when he says in Genesis 50:20, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. And much later when Paul says in Philippians 4:12 and 13, I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthened me. Can I let you in on a little secret? The secret is reliance on God's provision. Not the world or its illusion of its riches. Possessions and trickery were all that Laban had. Jacob had God, and nothing else mattered. When we're dealing with difficult times and situations, Do you feel like God has abandoned you? Or do you sit down and you think to yourself, man, the job just doesn't quite pay enough, but I'm still fed. I still have a warm house. I still have a roof over my head. I still have all the rest of the family. I have the church. I have all my congregation. I have all these friends. Are you alone? Or are you being misused and abused? I think that God's with us at all times. And when we rely on Him, nothing is really bad. Genesis 31:14 again through 16. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left us in our father's house? Are we not regarded to him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. Laban has cheated his own daughters as well. Jacob didn't have a bride price, so he had to work off the price. 14 years is a long time to work off for 2 wives. But apparently Laban took all that away from them as well. He's not going to give them anything. Notice that they said he treats us as foreigners. As long as Laban had them around, he treated them with disdain. The moment he risked losing them, suddenly he's now the father of the year and the the granddad of all the year. And the world is this way too. It will eat you up and spit you out as long as you are held captive to its ways. Once you proclaim your freedom in Christ and don't model your life anymore after the worldly patterns that we have to face, suddenly you are wanted, and it's all nothing but a trick, an illusion. Genesis 31:17 and 18. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he'd acquired, and patted them around, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. So basically, he just packed it all up and left. My wives, they've got my back. They're agreeing with what God said. They're saying, just do what God told you to do. Heck, we'll even help you pack. So they did. They packed, and they just... Now, why is this such a big deal to Jacob? Believe it or not, in those days, if you married a guy's daughters, when it came time for the dad to be taken care of, the son-in-law took care of dad. Especially if he had no sons. Well, he's got sons. They can take care of dad. I want to be let go of everything. I want to be on my own. I want to go home and take care of my own family. That's all he's asking for. And finally God says, go, it's time to leave. He packed up, he left. And I guess it was good after all that Laban had a 3-day separation between them. Because Laban, we know, was sharing his own flocks off in the distance. And he did it in order to cheat Jacob, but it turns out for Jacob's good. Genesis 31:19 through 21. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he had intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and rose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. Now, Rachel either had the idol already or had made a side trip to get it. We've got 2 deceptions here. One is godly, the other is fleshly. Laban isn't told either about Rachel taking the household gods or that Jacob is leaving. He doesn't know about any of it. Jacob not telling Laban was considered a discourtesy. But it was not theft. It wasn't theft. And he did it in obedience to God. God said, go. Well, here I go. I'm leaving. What Rachel did and why she did, well, that's for another time. That's for another down the road message. Anyway, this is the act of the flesh that causes a big ruckus, because now this gives Laban the opportunity to take it to use. Oh, now I can pursue you because you stole something from me. When you try and stick with much of the flesh in the world as possible, not a lot of good things happen, and it gives the enemy the ability to accuse you. It's like starting up a motorboat and taking off without pulling up the anchor. You're going to pull hard, but you're not going to go very far. Or for us Christians, this is even better, I think. It would be like going to church and asking God what to have for lunch, which we're doing today. But then going home and sitting down with the Ouija board to find out what to have for lunch. The same difference, same thing. Genesis 31, 22 through 24. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God had come to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream by night and said to him, Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. God gave Jacob a 3-day head start. But he was moving so much slower because he didn't have as many people to take all that massive flock that he had. His kids weren't really big enough. I mean, they were big enough to be shepherds. But think about it. He didn't have that. He had a lot of kids, but not enough to deal with the flocks that he had. So he would have to move much slower. Laban, all he had to do was jump on the camels and with his sons and his men and just bust butt as fast as he could to get where he needed to be. I'm going to catch up with him, and we'll show him. But you see, God had other plans. Jacob was not the only one who God visits in a dream. God tells Laban not to say anything good or bad. Laban is going to speak, but maybe what God was saying was, don't do anything to him, don't lure him with false promises, and don't threaten to harm him in any way, or you're a dead man. Who knows? It's possible. We know that God has given similar warnings to the pharaohs in the past with Abraham and Sarah. Hey, don't touch his wife. That's not his sister, that's his wife. We know that Laban worshipped idols and used them to try and get his way. He told Jacob, through divination, I was told, I'm prosperous because of you. You can manipulate idols, or so people think, but you can't manipulate God. Laban and company finally catch up to Jacob. Genesis 31, 26 through 30. And Laban said to Jacob, What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And I guess press on. And now you've gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Laban accuses Jacob of deceit. Something that is what this old man has done for his entire life. He's a deceitful jerk. But this time, God told Jacob to leave. It's just like the enemy is trying to accuse us of doing something we used to be prone to, even when we are obeying God's word. You can't argue the enemy down. You can only rely on God to forgive you, to save you, and direct you. Laban here acts like he's the best father and grandfather in the entire world. Matter of fact, I'm so special. I'm the greatest dad and granddad on the planet Earth. But we have already know what his daughters think of him. They told him he's a cheat. He's a jerk. And yes, we're ready to leave. He will do anything, as will the enemy, to keep you from following God's will. What did he say to him? You carried my daughters off like prisoners of war. And obviously he didn't know his daughters all that well like he claimed. Compare that to what the enemy tells you. If you follow Jesus, it's going to hurt your family. And they won't want to have anything to do with you because they will label you as a fanatic. And God can't be pleased if you hurt your family. Wow. Talking to the stepkids and my own kids, yep, we're fanatics. But you know what? Get over it. Get over it. The truth sometimes hurts. Even now, Laban can't see anything wrong with his behavior, with his attitude. But he says Jacob is homesick. That's the reason why he's leaving. Well, just partially. Just partially. But then he adds the final blow. Why did you steal my gods? Now, we know that the little gods that they serve are little bitty wood or stone figurines and stuff. They might have just been clunks of junk or what have you. But they were thought to add prosperity to the household. Genesis 31, 31 and 32. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours, and take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen those household gods. He correctly states, as to the reason why he's leaving, yes, I was homesick, but I also know that I was afraid for you would take everything that I worked so hard for from me and either send me on my way or just out and out kill me. He didn't know he was condemning Rachel if she was caught with them. Genesis 31, 33 through 35. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and to Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt about all over the tent, but he did not find them. And she said to her father, let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of woman is upon me. So he searched, but he did not find the household gods. I really find that humorous. And maybe, just maybe, this is why Jacob was so attracted to Rachel. She's a pretty good deceiver too. She's just like him. So Laban comes out empty-handed. And Jacob, oh my gosh, Jacob, my good friend Jacob, oh, the dam is about to burst because he has finally been pushed to the limit. And all those 20 years of bottling things up explode. Genesis 31, 36 through 42. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all of my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it right here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by the wild beasts, I did not bring it to you. I bore the loss myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day, the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sheep fled, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands, and he rebuked you last night. Kind of reminds me of that Bose commercial. He's probably yelling and old Laban's hair is flying backwards. He has uncorked everything. And I love that. This dose of truth brings out the truth in Laban finally. We need to speak the truth, God's word, to the enemy. It is true that I'm a sinner, but Jesus brought me and I belong to him. And if it weren't for him, you'd trounce me all over the place. Laban finally admits what Jacob suspected all along, that all the deals, the wages, even the marriages were a sham. Laban never intended on giving them to Jacob, and if Jacob stuck around long enough, Laban would have found some way to cheat him out of it all. Genesis 31, 43 and 44. Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters. The children are my children. The flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters or their children, whom you have borne, or whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. He was going to take it all. These are mine. Nothing belongs to you, but what can I do? Nothing. Because God told me to do nothing to you. Jacob's got to feel pretty good right now. He's got to be relieved. He's got to be almost in tears because he had finally let it all out. He was never facing conflict. That's why he ran away from home to begin with, to escape from his brother trying to kill him. He's never really dealt with anything harsh in his life. If we bottle things up in our life when it comes to personal relationships, work relationships, anything else, we too are that same way. There will come a time when it all just will be pushed beyond that limit, and I feel sorry for the other person. I really do. The importance of forgiveness and conflict resolution is a crucial aspect of resolving conflicts in a biblical manner. Forgiveness is at the heart of the Christian faith as demonstrated by Christ, the ultimate act of forgiveness on dying on the cross. When we extend forgiveness to others, we reflect God's love and grace in our own lives. Forgiveness is not optional for us. It's a command from God himself. And it's the one that always stands out the hardest. Matthew 6, verses 14 and 15. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. We shouldn't bottle this stuff up. We shouldn't hold it in heart, because all we're doing is making ourselves hurt. The other person may not realize that what they're doing, but I can't say that because a lot of times they do know exactly what they're doing. And this powerful statement underscores the importance of forgiveness in our spiritual lives and relationships. Forgiveness serves as a catalyst for healing and reconciliation. When we choose to forgive, we release ourselves from the burden of resentment and bitterness. Jacob had all this bitterness and resentment built up in him. And it can do the same thing to us as it did kind of with him. It can poison our hearts and hinder our ability to resolve conflicts effectively. Ephesians 4:31 and 32, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. In the context of conflict resolution, forgiveness opens that door for genuine dialogue and understanding. It creates an atmosphere of grace where both parties can acknowledge their faults, seek reconciliation, and work towards mutually beneficial solutions. By practicing forgiveness, we break down the walls of hostility and create a space for God's love to transform the situation. Do you think Jacob went away and forgave Laban? It's hard to say. But I do know that they put up that pillar and anointed it and said, you won't cross over here to get me, and I'm not going to cross over here to get you. But I think in the long run, he ended up forgiving him. Because he got to keep all the stuff because God was there with him. And it's important to note that forgiveness does not necessarily mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. Rather, it involves choosing to release the offender from the debt that they owe us and entrusting justice to God. When we get out there this week, remember, don't let anybody do anything to you and bottle it up. Talk to them about it. Because if you bottle it up, you're just hurting yourself. Keep that one in mind. Let's go to prayer.